Welcome to Daily Cyber episode number 295. We're almost close to 300. Give me a sec here, make sure everyone can hear me okay. Today's going to be an interesting, again, I think what I'm going to say is this last couple months has been AI focused, and we're having a lot of great experts and subject matter experts around AI. So I'm going to keep the topic going just because it's a hot topic that I think every organization, every company right now is really looking at what to look at when AI, what to look at solutions, technology, from security to compliance to even just different types of applications. I've been talking to companies about everything from sales right under the sun. So today's going to be actually a great conversation. I have a great expert. Justin is the founder and CEO of StrikeGraph. With more than 20 years of experience as a CTO and an entrepreneur, he started StrikeGraph after experiencing the challenges of compliance firsthand and realizing that it had to be a better way. What makes Justin's background especially unique is that he's also an AI researcher. He is co-founded peer-reviewed researches on semantic mapping, holding a patent in education NLP, neuralistic language programming systems, and has built platforms used by more than 5 million students, teachers, and administrators. That combination of enterprise software, AI, compliance led Justin to a key insight frameworks like NIST, ISO, SOC 2, HIPAA, CMMC are often describing many of the same underlying concepts in different ways. That idea became the foundation of how StrikeGraph approaches compliance. Justin also hosts the Secure Talk podcast, ranked at top 2.5% globally. So a lot of great conversation that Justin and I are going to have. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, and let's hack at it. Good afternoon, Justin. How are you doing? You think you're just on mute. Give me a second there. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Excellent. I'm doing wonderful, Brandon. Thanks for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm excited. From the research and information like you provided and just looking up, like you've got a depth of knowledge when it comes to AI and what are we really kind of looking at in this kind of era right now. Like what's the crazy thing is it keeps evolving. It keeps changing. What you think you know on Monday changes by Wednesday, and then Friday it's a completely different situation.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think for those of us that have been working, man, it's changed monikers over the years, right? I would have called it data science or analytics a long time ago, into machine learning, and now, of course, we call it AI. I think the evolution has been super interesting. I think it's some of the most powerful computer science work that we do. Of course, I'm also perturbed by the hype engine a lot of times, and it frustrates me. I like the science side. Yeah.
Right. So then, in that being said, where do you sit right now on from the evolution of where it started to where we are now, and then to where it's going to go in the next year, 2 years, 5 years?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So let's take a look at where we've come from, and apologies if some of this is a little technical, but I think your audience will love it.
Yeah.
We started with standard Bayesian type models. These are all probabilistic. They're trying to predict a particular outcome. We could do a straight up 2-dimensional Bayesian model all the way into things like random forest work that we were working on, or 3-dimensional kind of in-tier stuff, and into neural nets. I think one big innovation in the last 7 years has been the tensor style model. That's what we see in the natural language processing side. And remember, a lot of people thought NLP was dead. We were running a lot more mathematical analysis on things, turning things into numerical values and not really dealing with the core language itself. And the tensor methodology of developing a model really allowed us to crack back open NLP. And then the second innovation was the size of the training data. And I think for good or bad, really, some companies with a fair bit of funding, we're able to accrue essentially an internet's worth of written information. And you take an internet's worth of written information and you train a model on it, a tensor model on it, and that's where we get the large language models that we have now. I think we're seeing those today, like the present day, is that those large language models are hitting a wall. They're hitting a physics wall, they're hitting an energy wall, they're hitting a cultural wall, like our interest in funding them at the level that we have. And we haven't yet seen, I'm still wondering where the profitability comes in at some point when we think about them as businesses. Where do we go 5 years from now? I hope more towards accuracy. The small language model environment is really moving very quickly. And that's where we focus a lot of our time on, building highly accurate models that are exponentially smaller than a large language model, but outperform them from an accuracy perspective. And until we get another major innovation like the tensor innovation or some hardware innovation, it's really going to be hard to break through the physics.
And you're talking about that. Now, I want to go back. Talk to me a little bit the NLP, because a lot of times when you hear NLP, neuro-linguistic language programming, you're kind of looking at how things are said in a certain terminology. Like, and the way I learned NLP originally was, it's how you were saying things to retrain and program your brain. So I wasn't always talking in a negative sense, like, oh, I'll never do that. Well, if I say I never do it, it's actually going to happen. I'm never going to do it. But I say there's a possibility that's going to happen. You open up a whole different, probability and scenario. How did they start to incorporate that with like learning language management, AI, like all that? How did they start to look at the NLP process and methodology in that?
Yeah, the simple side of natural language processing a long time ago was language classification work. We first had to distill what's the difference between a word and punctuation, and what words belong into which languages. And really, it was a massive amount of classification work. Like, this is an English word and this is a Spanish word. Then you start to get into the structure of those words together, noun, verb, how do things associate with each other. And finally, where we start getting to, and this is where the tensors really help, is that we get into these concept alignment, right? So a set of words, a sentence, maybe even a paragraph, is organized around a concept. And as we can do conceptual association, now we can ask, you can see the chatbots start to happen, right? Give me a paper on a particular topic, and I can bring in the language and write that language around that particular topic. The reason it's been so powerful, and I do see a lot of impact here in software development, is that it's a highly regulated language, right? Like, there's a lot of rigor to how we write programming, and a lot of data, like a lot of training data in the open source world. And so I think that's why it's been one of the most accurate and effective applications for some of these large language models.
Okay. And that makes sense. And I think I'm using a different term, because you said natural language programming versus I was talking about neuralistic language programming. So again, two different concepts. Funny thing is, anyone watching this, the acronyms are crazy when you're in cybersecurity, IT, and all that. So a lot of times I have to clarify, okay, what is your NLP that you're talking about?
That's right.
When we're talking about AI is natural language programming as you defined it.
That's right. Now, neurolinguistics is a parallel field, right? We're talking about how the brain forms language.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, you can see that's why we think sometimes these things feel alive, right? They mimic the way a human would talk, mostly because in a little bit of a ham-fisted way, not as efficiently as our brains do, it's generating language for us. It seems like it's working the same way. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where we're seeing, I think the challenge right now, and I don't know if you're seeing this, is people are getting so connected to ChatGPT, Claude, having technical conversations, but also having natural conversations about day-to-day stuff and development and personal development and relationships. And I know even sometimes people are saying like they're talking about counseling and things along that line. So it's like, it's expansive from where the technical side is to now the evolution of the human engagement side too.
Yeah. Well, I think, you and I probably enjoy Star Trek. I remember watching the one where they could start talking to their computer, and I was like, oh, what a cool interface. Like, I wish I had that interface. And we're getting there. It's starting to come close. Yeah.
Well, I saw someone online create Jarvis, right? And do that. And I've like named my chat GBT, gave them a name, and have conversations while I'm driving. But again, I'm doing the technical stuff, but I'm not really going into like personal information, but I'm like asking like, so, hey, tell me a little bit about the threat hunts that are going on right now, or what's going on ransomware, or, what is some things I need to know about the cybersecurity industry? And then it's coming back and doing some research and coming back and talking to me.
Yeah.
But I'm having like a real conversation.
Yes. Well, that's how we're used to learning a lot of times. I think we created this kind of industrial education complex in a way with the sage on the stage, and we listen to a person lecturing. But the more natural way that humans learn is in dialogue. So
Right.
that's one of the reasons we're so attracted to them as a research tool, is that we want to ask question and respond, ask question and respond. Our brains will soak up information that way. Also, I just have to say, right, the search engine products in the marketplace really struggled to support super useful information. 2 years ago, it was hard to weed through Google results and not just feel like I was looking at an ad campaign, everything I clicked on.
Yep.
And I have to say that, these tools do a better job of distilling at least an 80% expertise in a set of information really quickly for me.
Well, I'm finding this, and this is personally for myself, Claude is actually getting better because it asks confirmation questions before it starts. Like, no, ChatGPT kind of hallucinates and it comes back. Oh, this is what you're looking for. Like, now I'm looking for this. And then you kind of have to go back and forth for a little bit to get the data. But I know with Claude right now, when you prompt it, it goes, are you sure you're looking for this? Did you want me to kind of look at that? Did you want me to narrow it down to this? And then it gets it down to a point where you're like, oh, yeah. So you've got all the criteria. Then it goes out, and then you get more of a cleaner result of what you're looking for. So I think we're evolving. And again, I think to me is like, I explained this to a colleague, I think it's like we're just learning how to use fire. Like, I think it's that part where like you've got two stones and you're putting together and you're doing it, but like we're going to evolve until there's like skyscrapers, and AI is going to be that, where it's like it's going to evolve. And I think even with myself, I'm seeing the tools and things that people are building at speed, right, and so efficient. Like I know for myself, if I like back in the day, I owned my own marketing company. Now, if I was going to develop a website, it'd be 3 months of, building up a framework, looking at each page and the skeleton of it, and what I want to have, and the content, and HTML and CMS, and just building everything out, and then putting it together and making sure there was no errors. I'm literally going, okay, hey, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever AI I'm using, I need to create a website. Here's what I need to do. Here's the color scheme. Here's the framework. Here's some examples, all that. Can you create me the HTML code? Okay, I'm going to go do something else. I'll come back. I grab a coffee, and it's, here you go. Here's your HTML file. Here's this. Here's your JSON. Here's that. Here's that. And you're like, okay, like that cut down 3 months of like development to an hour, right? Of kind of like prompting it. And then now I have a website. So I think the evolution of technology, applications, websites, all that is now going to be streamlined. I'm even seeing with video and audio now. I think you're seeing it. I see in the background, like the audio, like the soundboard and everything. But I think even with that, like it's starting to streamline that whole process of people being creative to now, oh, I can get this AI tool to do it, and it cuts down the time.
Yeah. I like your fire metaphor, because throughout human history, after the use of fire hasn't changed, right? Its nature is still fire. I do struggle to see where AI makes some type of, general intelligence. Like, none of that seems possible to me. It's the application that you're describing, right? We are creatively finding the best applications. And at first, it's an efficiency tool. We find efficiencies in it. So, look, I obviously enjoy making music. I like making music, but I also like not thinking that the AI is going to write the song, but it's part of the tool set that may go into helping me algorithmically generate something brand new that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. And so I think if you think about it from an artistic perspective or a creativity perspective, there are innovators out there that are going to find new and imaginative ways to use these tools, and our humanity is still going to be a part of it.
So then I want to bring us back. I mean, this is all great. Like we kind of the foundation, and which is good, because I want people to think the creativity of this, because the possibilities are endless. And when we jump into like the cybersecurity realm and the governance, compliance, all that, it becomes endless of like, what can we really do? And it's like, what can you think of? Whatever you can think of, you now can create, and you can, something that I've done and I've taught other people is like prompt the AI agent, say, I want to do that. Draw me out a business plan, draw me a project plan. Tell me what I need to know to create this. What are the risks? What are the challenges? What are the areas I'm going to run in? Get it to do all that. It will lay out the framework for you, maybe a white paper, whatever. And then you're like, okay, go, no go, hours of work, levels of effort. How much is it going to cost me? Do I have to buy other tools to incorporate that? Gives you all that. And you're like, okay, can you do that for me? Right. And it starts that. So I know one of your expertise is the CMMC. And like, I really want to jump into that, is the enclave. Like the enclave question I have really is what mistakes do contractors make when it comes to CMMC? Because I know that is a massive, massive compliance and regulatory uplift for companies that are looking to work with organizations like the government, even the military. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So a little background on CMMC. It stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. The impact of this compliance outcome is to the defense industrial base. So if you're a contractor for the Department of Homeland Security, or a subcontractor to a prime for the Department of Homeland Security, you'll have to reach a level of CMMC compliance. And it's going to affect, according to the DoD, about 190,000 businesses in the United States over 3 years. Now, it's based on the NIST 800-171-R2 standard, and a lot of these organizations have never been through anything like this. Think like a manufacturing company, right? Or a civil engineering firm is a good example of the types of businesses. Us, perhaps in the tech industry, we've dealt with cyber for a long time. A lot of our crown jewels are in the data or systems that we support. And we've had to be through some form of cybersecurity compliance in the past. But these teams, they haven't been through. Now, a long time ago, when questions first started coming out as I was building software about our cybersecurity, I could get through a lot of procurement discussions by just saying, hey, we host our systems on AWS. And they were like, oh, that's great. You've done the work, Justin, very good. And then they'd adopt the platform. Of course, I knew at the time, I was like, they should ask more questions. That's not quite enough. But we were trying to close the deal. I think the enclave issue is the exact same. And enclave is like adopting a technology, but it will not make you compliant. And that is the big mistake. I think I have a fairly long white paper I call In Search of Magic Wands. And it talks about the enclave as an industry, like, oh, if I just adopt this enclave, then I'll be CMMC compliant. But we did an analysis, and even the top enclave systems really only cover about 50% of the requirements for NIST 800-171-R2. Now, they have some impact on a large number of the requirements, but the impact is quite minor. And so it's easy to look at it from a high level and think, oh, if I get the enclave, 110 of the 117 requirements will be solved for. That's not true at all. I would be super afraid of that type of claim. It's really less than half. And so you still have a ton of work to do. And the problem is, if you say you're CMMC compliant and you have a breach, and the lawyers at the DoD decide they want to investigate, you'll get hauled under False Claims Act. It is very dangerous.
Oh, 100%. And I think, so walk through, and let's kind of take a step back. You walk through, what does it take to be CMMC certified?
Yeah. Well, first, there's 3 levels to CMMC compliance, and that's helpful. It depends on the type of data that you utilize. A CMMC level 1 will have what's called federal contract information. So think like the RFP that you're using or the contracting information. And really, I believe there's just a small number of requirements you need to meet. They're fairly straightforward. Some baseline encryption and backup, good governance, and just systems are secured, like laptops and things like that. The next is CMMC level 2, and that is for CUI data, or confidential unclassified information. So think, you're not dealing with classified data, but it's that one tier below that really, we can think back to the old World War II theme of loose lips sink ships. It's like knowing the type of metal that was used in a particular manufacturing for armor could really be a problem on the battlefield. And I think those folks that operate in the DoD that support our military in this private-public partnership recognize that keeping that data secure and private is about saving lives on the battlefield. And CMMC Level 2 has about 117 high-level requirements. And inside of each one of those, you'll find another 5 to 10 requirements as well. CMMC Level 2 requires everything from a self-assessment to a full third-party audit, a C3PAO audit. I think the big surprise in the industry is that we thought most of it would be self-assessed, but we're seeing this roll out, and much of it is requiring a C3PAO. CMMC Level 3 are for those folks that really have the most sensitive of data. And I've only come across a couple of CMMC Level 3s, and it requires an audit by DIBCAC. That's the DoD themselves. And so they'll come in and audit you. But those are the tiers to CMMC. It is a very robust compliance requirement, and it is very far-reaching and impacting a lot of companies. Yeah.
And I think that's the key when someone looks at the CMMC. From my opinion, you really have to have that business relationship. You really have to understand how you're now. I know some companies are strictly, government contracts and things along that line. They're working for the military, 100%. If you're breaking into that industry, you really have to get someone that's an expert, like for yourself, and do an initial assessment on how you're going to do it. Because I've seen some people try to incorporate with their current business model, and the data is all over the place. The controls are all over the place. And where I've seen like consultants go, no, you need like a completely Chinese wall between where you're going to have all your relationships, contracts, business relationships, controls for the CMMC, all has to be segregated, can't be inside the regular business, can't be inside the Active Directory, the SharePoint, whatever that you have, has to be completely separate. And I think people need to understand that.
Yeah. I would recommend for anyone that's ready to go through this, before you build an enclave or segment IT infrastructures or build a shadow IT system for your government contracts, really kind of dig into the scoping first. Do an analysis of what you have already. I think there's a lot of bad information in the marketplace. Things like if you're on Google Workspaces, for example, they're already a really good enclave from an IT encryption backup perspective. The real challenge has been the Microsoft systems. Microsoft Commercial tried to make themselves essentially be a system that would be FedRAMP moderate, and wound up not making the cut. And so that left a whole lot of companies that use Microsoft as infrastructure kind of out in the cold. And I think Microsoft deserves to be called out on this, honestly, because none of their competitors have had this particular issue. So if you're a Microsoft customer, you may need to get kind of a GovCloud Microsoft instance. It still looks the same. The trick is where the data is hosted, how backups work, the level of encryption that Microsoft has implemented on those servers. But it's Outlook and Office 365 at the end of the day.
100%. And that's why I was saying, I agree with you. I think having a consultant that's an expert come in and do an evaluation and an assessment on your business needs, your topology, your network, your IT environment, have them do an assessment and help them to draw like a roadmap. Like, what do you need to get to level 1? What would you need to get to level 2? And the level of effort and potentially even budget, because some of this stuff, and I've worked with customers where it's $1 million plus lift. And it's like, whoa. Like, we're looking just to go to these contracts. These contracts are not $1 million. Like, is this an investment we want to take on? It's like, that's a good question. Like, do you want to invest that amount of money for the potential, or do you have signed contracts that they've given you time to stand up the environment? Like, where do you really sit? Is it a nice to have because you want to go that direction with your business? Or, hey, we have live contracts, we need to get this set up. Like, where do you sit?
Yeah. Right? Two things that I really agree with you. One is that I definitely agree, doing a scoping, an expert, even internally, like reading the documentation and understanding where you sit. Do that before you go buy a technology tool. I mean, Brandon, how many times have you and I seen somebody buy a cybersecurity tool and you're like, why did you buy that? That was totally unnecessary. Well,
the thing your point is, sometimes you see the two challenges I see: either become shelfware, they never use it, or two, they have an example of the competitor in their environment already. Like, why do you have two EDRs?
Yes.
You're like,
Yeah.
you have two endpoint protection solutions. Well, Cisco did this and SentinelOne did that. Okay, but they both do that. Like, what were you looking for? Why? Well, the sales guy told me. You're like, oh, like, how can you? How did you sign it like a long-term contract? Yeah, each of them are 3-year contracts. You're like, oh my god.
I know. I think one other thing I'd recommend is that a big part of, and look, this is true for any compliance, from SOC 2s to HIPAA to CMMC. The biggest part of the lift is oftentimes just the operational governance in the business.
Oh yeah.
And so you can spend a lot of time fixing how HR works, or security training happening, or how you're onboarding, offboarding teammates, or just basic logging and monitoring that you need to do, and get that rolled out. I know that the technical bits seem the most intimidating to all of us, mostly because people don't understand them or it takes expertise. But oftentimes it's not the hardest lift.
Well, I'm going to bring this up, and this is kind of jumping a little bit. When we talk about government risk compliance, policy and documentation, is it now becoming a lot easier with AI?
Well, I think so, yes. I mean, we're certainly using it to those ends in our solutions. Let's identify that much of the work from a compliance perspective is natural language, right? Like, whether it is a policy, which I think is a really old way to do this, or you're identifying a risk, or you're writing a control, or you're collecting evidence, that data is almost always in the form of language. Even a JSON structure, like we could look at a JSON structure and be like, yes, it's data, but it's kind of language architected data. It's just highly rigorous in its structure. And so utilizing AI to pull these things together with the frameworks that we're trying to meet, with testing of the congruence of an evidence to the control operation, those types of things are very powerful. And it's getting to the point, you talked about how building a business plan. What we see, the leading edge of what we're doing is AI to develop your compliance roadmap, right? Like, you don't need to be an expert in what you have to do to go out and be CMMC compliant. We can look at what you're doing today and develop a roadmap of the best next steps to go and hit that particular outcome. And that's super exciting because it's just coming from real data about what you actually do, the types of activities, controls, the current settings on a server, and what you might need to change to get to an outcome.
And I think that's one thing that I'm seeing more now is on the GRC space, is that I'll use Claude, for example. You can write to Cowork and get it to start creating an agent that's now in the skill set. The agent said, hey, I need to get CMMC. Write me all, tell me all the policy, write me the templates for it. Make sure it's all structured, my style guide, colors, whatever. Here's my company logo, branding, and at least it can create you the structure of all the policies that you need. Then, of course, you're going to need a human element to kind of go through and say, okay, what do I need? What do I not need? What do I have? What do I not have in the environment? What do I kind of do that? But you and I know that was before that was someone hand on keyboard typing all that out, right? Now it's more review and modification, and then going through the stakeholders and draft and approval process. But that level of lift went from huge to now, and I would say, from my experience, 90 days lift to get all those policies up and going to maybe 30 days, right? From start to finish.
Yeah, we're seeing folks drive through the compliance outcome a lot faster than they ever did before. Where we like to start with folks is also what you do today, to that scoping conversation, right? Like, what's happening today? Because I think that there's this tendency to think I have to reinvent how I work to go and meet, a CMMC compliance outcome, where you're probably 70% compliant already. And that terrifies people. That's why they get so scared when they come into this work, is that they think they have to reinvent. And, we're going to see a flip in this. 6 years ago, when I first started doing research for StrikeGraph and developing the solution, there was something like $8 billion spent a year on GRC platforms and $120 billion a year spent on non-financial audits.
Right.
That was consulting work, right? Like, that was the amount of consultants we were hiring for compliance.
Right.
I think it's going to flip. I think you're going to see that we don't use the consultant quite as much, and we use the tool more. And the reason is, in the tool, I can create a lot more accurate information about the business, and the AI model will be more accurate because it's using my information about my company. Sadly, the consultant rarely learned the business. They knew the law or the requirements, and they wanted to rinse and repeat across every customer.
Right.
And that was the only way to do it. They were doing the best they could.
Right.
But the tooling is quite powerful now. Yeah.
And I think as we evolve, my hypothesis is that the AI agents will start to tie into the environment, and it'll literally be plug into the environment, give an API connection to Microsoft, this, whatever environment, and then it'll go run. And then also it'll come back with, you have servers here, you have a network here, you have this here, you have a firewall, your access control, and all that. And then it'll give you a report, map that out for you. And then it's like, okay, your hardware controls, software controls, technical controls are at this maturity. Here's some recommendations, ones you have to harden, and it'll give you that full report: administrative controls, technical controls, mapping to any compliance, SOC 2, ISO 27001, CMMC, whatever that is, and say, okay, here's what you need to do to be compliant, and here's recommendations on how to do it, and here's resources. Like, it's literally like laid out for you.
Yeah, I think we're playing with that right now. So, like, you know, a big innovation has been automation for the collection of evidence, right? Like, I don't want to go and collect it anymore. Today in our platform, and we write our own models, so we host all of these. So we've either developed them or trained them ourselves, or taken an open source model and tweaked it to do what we want. But you'll come into the platform and say, hey, I need to pull my production firewall from AWS. And our AI model will write code for the CLI and research where that production firewall is and pull the JSON structure for you.
Right.
And so it's a whole different game when you're like, tell it what you want and let it go find that and develop the code for a repeatable, trusted process.
And I think this is the thing, and I don't know if you guys are doing this, but I think at the point there's going to be maturity where you're literally going to go, I want CMMC, I want this is my environment, connect, and then hit go, or just go. And then all of a sudden it's going to come back and tell you everything, because through the skills or how you program the LM and in the background, it's going to know where to search. It's going to know where to go and connect. It's going to know what to pull. So now it's not me thinking, okay, I have to train the model. Okay, yeah, I have a Fortinet firewall. I have a Palo Alto. Go do this, go do that. I have Active Directory. Oh yeah, it's Azure in the cloud. I have this. It's just going to go, no, go. And it's going to come up and prompt you. I need access to your Azure. I need access to this. Go, click. And then it's like just pulling information. And then it's going to give you a report. I feel we're close to that. I'm seeing it as like my day-to-day. I think we're months away versus you and I know with the technology and the speed, stuff like that. I'd be like, oh yeah, we're 5 years away from that. It's no, we're like 5 weeks away from that.
That's right. Yeah. I think this kind of the where we're at, the frontier of the innovation, you know, today, like what you can come into a piece of software and see is that exactly we'll have some understanding of the AWS infrastructure, because we can pull that. That's a set of data, right? Yeah. And from that set of infrastructure, we also know what the CMMC level requirements are. We have a library of written recommended control operations and a library of written recommended evidence operations. And we'll see where those glue together. And we'll start to recommend. We're like, hey, I think we can collect your data backup evidence, which is a requirement for this particular CMMC outcome, from this particular part of your Azure infrastructure or your Oracle Cloud infrastructure. And now we do put a human in the middle, and I think that continues to be really important. And the human has to say, yep, that's right. Go, that's where I want it to come from. And so we are sensitive, right? Like, it's very exciting, but it can go awry. And so we've kept this human in the loop kind of concept that someone needs to be babysitting these models a little bit before they go and do work for you.
And I know there's probably people out there thinking like, oh, great, AI is going to take over and there's not going to be any jobs and, you know, we're all going to be out of work. I think the work is going to transition from you were the hands-on keyboard person writing the policy, to now you're reviewing the policy. You're the one now looking at the output of the report and confirming the hallucinations and the challenge of the report and feeding back, okay, hold on, that was wrong. Go back, get this information. Oh, you connect that. I still think those people are needed, but I think it's going to transition from what they were doing before to what they're doing now.
I want to say that, like, the concern for how technology eats jobs is valid. Like, you and I have lived through cycles of people that were an expert in something, that technology was no longer necessary, and it was hard for them in the marketplace. So
yeah, 100%.
I'm not going to discount that happens. What I will say is that I haven't met a compliance team yet, and we've got companies that do $20 billion in revenue and $2 million in revenue that has fully staffed the team that they need for security and compliance. They don't have enough bodies today. So that starting from there, I don't think they're able to do the job they need because they don't have the tools to make them efficient enough.
Right.
When we, it must be almost 2.5 years ago, we rolled out a system to perform internal audit for companies. And it essentially would take how you described your security practices, and it would look at the evidence, and just like an auditor would, and said, does this evidence validate against how you described you were going to do the security practice and control operation?
Right.
And it was very dynamic, right? If you changed the way the control operated, it would change how it tested evidence that might come in to validate it. And at first we were really cautioned. We were like, well, don't say that you're automating internal audit because people will get nervous about their jobs. But the truth is that we're only auditing 15% of what we needed to before we shipped all that data over to a CPA or a PCI DSS QSV or a C3PAO. And now with the platform, we're actually auditing all of the data, every single bit of it, 100% of the information. And those people that were clicking through spreadsheets, having to stare at screenshots, are looking at the discrepancies and helping to solve problems. No one's lost their job.
No.
They become immensely more valuable, though, right?
100%.
Yeah. And so that's really exciting.
And I think I want to kind of reiterate on what you said. From the evolution, like, I mean, I came from VIC-20s and Commodore 64s, like back in that day. And then, you had the data centers and you had that, I think there's 3 types of people that will go through this evolution. There's ones that will fight it and say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to learn AI. And they're going to fold their hands. And they're going to be left behind. And they're going to run into that gap where, like, hey, I don't have a job. There's going to be ones that are having challenges to learn it. And I get it. Some people, it can be very technical, can be, a big lift. And then there's ones that are going to adapt. I think that's the 3 columns that I've seen through my evolution being in the career of watching where people go. And the adapters will have jobs and keep going. The ones that have a little bit of challenge, they'll get through. The ones that fight it are the ones that are going to be looking for work, because it's going to be a combination. It's going to be a hybrid, like all the stuff that you and I have learned over the years. It was never that, that one thing or that thing. It was that merged into that. It still had the same concept, but now this is the new way of doing it. So you still had the knowledge that you can bring with you, but you had to adapt and evolve into what the new solution or technology or application was. And then through that, you had a career and you just keep going. And I think that's where I always mentor people is like, this is my opinion about being in IT or cybersecurity. You're a student of life. You're constantly a student. You're constantly learning, constantly evolving. Never get tied to one thing, because it's going to change. It's going to be like what you think. Oh, I'm an expert at. Yeah, you're not. You're not an expert. You might be knowledgeable and more advanced right now, but give it some time. And our time is now shrinking. Where back in the day in 2000s, the early 2000s, late 90s or late 90s, 2000, Microsoft. Oh, it's a Microsoft expert. And you can kind of go and you can put that hat on. It's like, no more. It's changing constantly, right? It's evolving. But how the technology is, right? So I think anyone watching this is to take that at heart. Where do you sit in that 3 columns? And if you're tied to something and you think that's the only way to do it, start to open up the creativity that, hey, there's other ways. And that will give you the career. When I had a conversation with a person before that saying, they were like, hold on, AI is going to take a job. What's it worth to learn AI? I said, go look at job postings and see the value of learning AI right now. And the gap, like people are learning it and trying to find a career, and companies are trying to find experts at $150,000, $200,000 a year. I mean, there's a potential. If you spend another 6 months and a year learning AI, taking the Anthropic training, the potential for you having a job in 6 months is pretty high at $150,000, $200,000 a year. And that's just going to evolve.
Yeah. When I used to manage software engineers, this is not as applicable today. And I'd chat with them, I'd say, look, you need to constantly be learning 3 different software programming languages. You need to learn the one you're working in today for your job. You need to learn the one that's going to replace it, what's coming down the pipe. And you need to learn the outlier. And you'll never stop. That is what's exciting about this work and what's terrifying about this work.
Yeah.
You really can't slow down because the technology won't.
Right.
And that's why you love it. That's why you're here a little bit. You want to innovate. You want to be a part of that community that is designing and delivering the future. Then you have to be willing to challenge yourself every single day. And I think you're right. Like none of that has changed, right?
Right.
Our team, we pride ourselves on the ability that in some ways we feel like a giant killer, right? Like we deliver features faster than a lot of competitors with an exponentially smaller team. They're just highly talented and using the tools to maximum effect.
Well, here's something I want to give you guys credit for too, and a lot of smaller teams. There's a reduce of politics and bureaucracy in the environment where you guys can probably make decisions and evaluate your process and do your code review and get things to market faster. Where I've worked with bigger companies, I'm sure you have too, where it's a lot drawn out process of review and you're like, okay, guys, like we got to go, like we can get this out. No, this team has to review, they have to do their software development life cycle, end-to-end testing and this and that, and then it has to go back to that department and like, wow, like a lot of layers where we could have got this out a lot quicker. But that's bigger companies, and they say this, the analogy is bigger ships take longer to move, smaller ships are easier, faster to maneuver, right? Totally get that.
Yeah, and to our discussion, some of these tools, whether it be the compliance team or a product team, they're allowing those small teams to accelerate so quickly on the delivery side. Yeah. And then I struggle with the Silicon Valley model that's like sheer mass will win the day. I'm hoping we're past that again. I'm hoping back for what was happening from 95 to 2002, right, where it was the best product in the market. Yeah.
Right. And I think we'll get there too. I think that's where we're going. Now, want to come back into the AI native. Now, one of the questions I had is like, there's AI native and there's AI enhanced. Like, what's the difference?
Oh, yeah. So this is the way I describe it. We used to, when we were architecting a new bit of software, we'd say, okay, we're thinking about the data layer, we're thinking about the business logic layer, and we're thinking about the front end. And those 3 things have to work together. We do an MVC style approach, but we really architected in these layers. And really well before I worked on StrikeGraph, I used to talk to my teams and I would say, you know what, we need to add an intelligence layer. There's a data layer, there's a business logic layer, there's an intelligence layer, and then there's a front end to the system. And if you're going to be AI native, you have to architect for the intelligence layer, just like you would for the data layer. Where are you going to store your models? How are you going to train them? What is the testing methodology for accuracy and efficacy of those models? How will you interact with them between the other layers? And really, when you design a platform with an intelligence layer from the ground up, then what you're going to find is your pace of innovation as you start to develop AI tooling accelerates exponentially because the model you programmed last year is suddenly part of a chain of models doing something in an agentic fashion. When we started StrikeGraph 6 years ago, I think that, and this is no ding on my buddies that I incubated the company with, but those folks would have been like, Justin, you should really think about Web 3.0 and blockchain. That's the new. And I was like, yeah, I don't see it, right? Like AI, I thought before much, people thought not the data science thing was kind of known and there wasn't a lot of innovation there. But I thought, no, this is going to revolutionize this GRC space. Because I had done it in education. We had taken standards-based high-stakes assessments like the SAT and revolutionized the way content worked in that space. And so we said, we're going to build a GRC platform with an intelligence layer. I think years before people started catching on to what large language models can do.
Right.
And that set us up for a lot of success. And now our pace of innovation is really, it blows my mind. And I'm the one sitting in the seat with the team, and just so impressed. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Now, one of the things, going back to what we talked about, and I'm going to bring this back a little bit to security. I know we're talking like frameworks, right? Cybersecurity frameworks. There's so many out there, right? You know, ISO, SOC 2, you know, you've got AI frameworks that are coming out right now. How do you talk about, like, what do you do to, you know, harmonize those together, like, and to map them out?
Yeah. This has been a tough conversation. I've sat on a number of panels and given some talks on this. I think there is this holy grail for a lot of folks in the compliance industry where they're like, why won't they build us a harmonizing standard, you know, where it will map onto all the other frameworks for us? And we've seen some tactics like that. There's a couple of things out there, I think, where they've been like, oh, I'll write something and I'll write one standard. You can just use it, and it'll tell you what it does to HIPAA and PCI DSS and CMMC.
Mm-hmm.
The problem fundamentally is it's called a crosswalk.
Yep.
And so imagine that you're crosswalking one framework to another framework to another framework to another framework. And as you leap through it, the mathematical correlation between those jumps starts to break down. So you can't leap over 3 jumps. It breaks down. It's not a good correlation. And I've seen this in other data sets where we deal with tree-like structures and frameworks and things like that. So when we started, we knew that wouldn't work. We're like, that won't have the level of accuracy to pass an audit. That's what you're trying to do at the end of the day.
Okay.
What you need to think about is what you do at your organization. And so this is our way of working. We kind of threw out the policy, the narrative, as a design document for what we do, the operational characteristics, cybersecurity, HR, et cetera, in the organization. And instead, our customers work from a control set that they write. So it's more like a user story. Like, we're going to encrypt data using 256 AES bit style encryption on the wire everywhere. Okay, that's a good control. I could test that control. I could assign it an owner. I can collect evidence to validate that it operated. And when we operate from that kind of control set, then all of a sudden we harmonize the controls to every single framework. So we take the control operation and we say, this control operation maps onto CMMC or NIST 800-171 R2 in these 6 places, and HIPAA here, and SOC 2 there. And that is really powerfully accurate. Because instead of trying to crosswalk all the frameworks and having that break down when we get to the last framework, we're actually operating from a place of confidence, from what we do to what it means from an assessment.
So when you do that, it's mapping. I'm going to use the example of control as generally party standards like identity access management, you know, encryption at rest, encryption in motion. So you're saying you're going to be able to do that. So if I have encryption, I'm company ABC, I come to you and say, I have identity access management, I have this, I have all these controls. You're now able to map that out across different frameworks more accurately than the crosswalking process. Is that my understanding?
That's exactly right. Because what you do is ground truth.
Right.
And that works so much better.
But what if it's the reverse? And I'll give you an example. We just talked earlier about the CMMC. What if I don't have those?
Oh, now we have a gap. Now we understand what we need to fix, right? Isn't that so much better? And being like, oh, I solved for like 70% of this. And then I see this requirement in here about multi-factor authentication.
Right.
Okay, I need to write a control. Will require multi-factor authentication on any sensitive systems.
Right.
What are my sensitive systems? AWS, Google, or Microsoft Office 365 or Azure. Okay, now I've identified them. Now I need to go turn on MFA, and the evidence is multi-factor authentication is turned on for all these users in these systems. We have solved the problem now, right? Now the next framework that I go to, I almost guarantee you there's a multi-factor authentication requirement in there.
For sure.
You've already solved for it.
Right. Now, will that map it back through?
Absolutely. But we take it from the language of what you do.
Right.
Not from one framework to another. Because what if there are variances between what the frameworks describe? Our models can handle the variance.
Which is good, because I think that's one of the challenge. I mean, I'll talk about an experience I had just with HIPAA. When someone had NIST and HIPAA and you go back through, the description of the actual control is different from the NIST description. So when you're going through, it doesn't look one for one. It is when you look at the technical control, but it sounds like this is more expansive than this is. It's like, but it is technically the same control.
And sometimes our customers will take a look at something they wrote for NIST 800-171, and they'll say, okay, I wrote this control about encryption, and I look at it where HIPAA is concerned, and HIPAA talks about patient healthcare information, but my control doesn't. Well, guess what? I'm going to update the language of my control. Now I'm going to update it to say, I'm going to do multi-factor authentication requirement for any system that we deem sensitive that stores patient healthcare information. I'm all of a sudden compliant with HIPAA, and all I needed to change was the way we describe our control.
Yeah, 100%. And then against that comes to me is the more the administrative controls and policies, but also like the technical controls. And I want to, people watching this, I want to put a caveat here, and we will talk about this, is that like the compliance versus security. I want to bring that up here.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that people need to understand is that writing a policy doesn't make your company secure.
No.
Right. So you got to make sure you have the technical controls in place, which the policies then support and enforce that technical control. Because I've worked with companies, and I don't know if you have, but they go, yeah, I've got policies for it. But then when you look at the technical controls to get the evidence, like that's not fully executed. That's not fully in place. And that's leaving you vulnerable. Yeah, but we have a policy. If an auditor comes in and they want you to check all your policies, okay, yeah, you're good. But if a threat actor comes in, you're going to be completely screwed because it's an open door now, and they're going to get in. And guess what that compliance officer is going to do? They're going to come in and red flag you and check you off, and you get an X, and well, you weren't secure. But you're like, I had policies. What are you talking about?
That's right, Brandon. And you know where we found policies live in our way of working is as evidence. A lot of times you'll write a control, and for that control to effectively be operated, a team of people needs to understand that process or those requirements or have some expectations set. That's where a narrative is really good, right? Because we can send them an acceptable use policy or a data disposal process. And now those are valuable. So we use them as evidence, not as a design document, but the control is the design document. And then evidence that you've effectively operated the control is that you wrote a policy so people know what to do.
Right, 100%. But I think to your point, I think companies need to understand that.
Yes.
I think they need to understand how that hierarchy works and how to utilize each of those. Because I totally agree with them, I'm totally in line with you. But I think that's where the challenge is that when it comes to administrative controls, technical controls. Now, I love to hear, what is your variation between compliance versus security?
Yes. I think of them as like different lenses on what's happening. You know, for me, in my mind, I think about compliance as like a testing or assessment outcome. You know, if I'm compliant, I want to be able to have someone come in and test me against a framework. Like a framework to me is like the OWASP requirements for a server hardening. You know, did I do all these steps, or could I look at the server and see that that thing is done and that thing is done and that thing is done? These frameworks to me are very similar. So when you're talking about I want to be NIST 800-171 compliance, to me, you're saying, I want to make sure that operationally, I'm meeting the requirements of this testing instrument. And that if someone came and tested me against it, they would say, yes, you're meeting those requirements. Now, when I think about security broadly, like the big word, I think about what do we do at our organization to help keep our business resilient, our customers safe, our employees productive and happy.
Right.
And, you know, I think risk is a good place to start. You know, there are a lot of people that are really strong on the risk side, and that can help you scope what you should do. But that's why we love to think about security as a kind of this broad set of practices that keeps the business in a healthy space. And then the compliance as a testing instrument for, if I were to look apples to another company, am I similar in my meeting those requirements?
Okay. The way I see it is that I think the compliance is a standard baseline that most companies, if they don't understand or have a security professional that can drive the program, gives them a baseline of where they should be at.
Yes.
And kind of, okay, because there's some companies, and you and I have worked with them, where they just don't know where to start. Like, where should I be? Right. And they have the ISO 27001 and this, cybersecurity framework, whatever that may be. At least it gives them a baseline. You should be here. Now, that's not the stopgap. He's like, oh, I got it. Woohoo, I'm done. Like, I never have to do any other work. That's your maturity to say, hey, I've done this, but now how are you maturing the environment as you go? Because then you can say, I follow this guide. Now the frameworks improve, right? Year to year. And then you have different ones that cybersecurity insurance, you have the NIST cybersecurity framework. Some of them come up with different controls that you need to place. So if your insurance says one thing, your NIST says, and you have both in the environment, okay, at least you're at least that baseline. So like you said, and I agree with it, an auditor comes in, third party due diligence says, okay, are you doing everything you do? You're like, hey, yeah, I'm NIST. I'm following the NIST certified. I'm ISO certified, right? 27. At least then kind of go, at least you're up to here. Yeah. Now, are you doing anything else in your roadmap? Are you doing anything else over and above that? Yes, we are, or no, that's all we do. We just do that. But at least shows a baseline of maturity.
Yeah. And look, no one needs to reinvent the wheel, right? These, like ISO 27001, all of these things, even as a baseline measurement, they're really useful to us in that these are best practices. They're designed usually by committees of experts that have operated a lot of organizations and also understand some of the threat landscape out there that we need to deal with.
100%.
And so I think take them not as, gosh, somebody's telling me what to do, and more as these are effective practices so that I don't have to redesign. I can use these as a tool to make sure I'm covering my bases. I mean, I love that. There are more important things to go and design, like the best product in the world or the most effective way of keeping customers moving forward and excited and happy about your solution. Yeah.
100%. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring up, and we talked about the SOC 2, Type 2, and the certification. What do you see the future of the SOC 2 in the certification?
Yeah, SOC 2 itself is in a challenging place right now. We had a fairly bad situation with Delve, but it had been going on for a long time. We could call it the audit mill issue. Right. The challenge is that compliance in a box products were essentially making companies do everything the same exact way.
Right.
And not all companies are the same, but that's one of our pillars on the way we work, is that every company is unique. They'll probably design a unique set of operational practices. That doesn't mean they don't meet a compliance outcome or aren't secure. It actually means that they're operating their business in a most efficient and effective manner. And so when that happened and things were just kind of like packaged up and run through a CPA firm real quick, and then there was all of a sudden a lack of independence between the CPA firms and some of the larger automation platforms for SOC 2 in the marketplace, because they would feed so many leads into that CPA firm that they couldn't really get off of that lead funnel. And they dictated the price of the audit to the CPA firm. They told them exactly how much they could charge. And of course, they wanted them to charge as little as possible, so they could charge the maximum amount for the software. And then you winds up, the CPA firm is not really doing the right amount of testing.
Right.
This is tragic. And I railed about this 5-6 years ago to the AI CPA myself. I was like, this is going to be a catastrophe for the SOC 2 marketplace. People are going to lose trust in these assessments, and that doesn't do any of us any good. We have to be really careful. And of course, it took the Delve situation, I think, for all of that to really implode around it. So where does it go from here? I don't know. I think we need to take a breath and take a step back. A lot of our customers are kind of being a lot more picky, and so are we, about the CPA firm that they choose to work with. StrikeGraph works with any CPA firm. We just want to support our customers. We're really flexible in that. And we've really, the market has driven us to things we didn't love. And I think we're moving more towards a lot of independence with the CPA firm. That's what I want. That is what I want.
Right.
But also there are other frameworks to choose. ISO 27001 is an incredibly well-managed certification process. It's a double-blind test between one audit team and the certifying body. The framework is well known. The certifying body has to really be rigorously assessed by ISO. And so I think you can shop what you want to do from a compliance perspective. And I recommend people do. I don't think it'll go away entirely. It's just turned out to be too easy a compliance outcome to get, and
Mhm.
people are checking the box with it. But man, if I were getting one today, I'd want to pick a brand of CPA firm. I'd want to pay more money for it, and I'd want to work with a preparing team that really kind of treated my business carefully. You know, Brandon, one thing about this that is crazy. When I got into this marketplace, the lowest cost SOC 2 audit you could get in the marketplace was $20,000. That was the cheapest you could get it for. It's the only thing I've seen in the last 6 years that has gotten cheaper by orders of magnitude. Like, we hear stories about $2,000 SOC 2 audits, and I'm like, how are you going to effectively test an organization for
Right.
$2,000? That is not done well.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Totally agree with you. I think too, and this is my opinion, I think with AI and companies having their own governance risk compliance, AI driven solution internally, I think it will map out, like you're talking about with, strike graph and all that, is that I think it'll map them out, get the evidence, get the policies, documents, have everything, make sure everything's up to date, even the screenshots and the metadata that you're getting from the screenshots saying, hey, it was a January 1st audit that you did internally, and you got all the screenshots that we need to show the evidence, and they look through the ORC Reddit and said, okay, yeah, that's all set up properly. And then you kind of go and you get a score. Here's your SOC 2, type 1 internal score. So then when you come up for the audit, you literally can zip that file and say, here you go, auditor, it's ready to go. And I think their level of assessment now shrinks.
Yes. I think that's true.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I like to tell customers your audit, if you're working with us well, your audit will feel like an open book test.
Well, I think this, to my point, is you're now able to provide them an internal report, all the evidence, all the policies and all that. And they kind of go, okay, let me look at that. Let me look at that. There you go. Now, I know some SOC 2 type 2s is generally like 6 months. It's a longer, but this could like shrink that down to a couple weeks of them reviewing everything going, okay, like you literally are at that point. Now, and I want to put a caveat here. It's people doing that work first, implementing that and doing that and being at that point where they have an A scored 95, 98 score on that test. Now, something that you talked about, and I did, some companies I run across, like, hey, you do SOC 2 type 2, but they don't do software development. And it's a ding on them because, like, hey, it's one of the requirements. You have to have an SDLC policy. And you're like, but I don't develop software. Everything is like out of the box. I work with Microsoft. Like, I don't develop any software. I think there's the caveats, but I think when you get to that point, I think it's going to be a lot more efficient.
Can I just say, like, to any company out there that's getting a SOC 2, if there's something you don't do, like it's not applicable, you can go to the CPA firm and say, this is not applicable, not a risk for me for this reason. We don't do software development. And they're like, the CPA will say, okay, yeah, I'm not going to test you on that. There's no requirement there. And they should every time. We have services businesses that don't do software development, and we've eliminated the SDLC requirements because they don't do software development. And when the CPA firm comes and chats with them, we point out in the risk ledger or the risks that they looked at the risk, they scored the risk. It's not a risk. This is a reason. And like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, done, right?
Yeah.
I've had to go through that myself with different auditors and all that third-party due diligence where you have to level set them and say, okay, hold on, like time out.
Yeah.
They don't do that. No, but hold on. No, you can't get any evidence of it. I appreciate that, but that's not something they do at all. But they don't. No, not at all. And you just kind of that, and they're like, okay. And then eventually they go, okay, scratch that out. Okay, we're good. And they kind of move on, right? So I think having the good team in place to be able to discuss that, evaluate that, discuss with your auditor and or accountant or whatever that the CPA, doing all that helps you to get through. But again, I think with AI, that reporting and evaluation, preparation, scoping, getting all that ready, having that report, having the repository for all your policies and your artifacts and all that, I think it's going to get to people where these third-party due diligence, SOC 2 type 2, CMMC, like all that, it's going to streamline.
I think it is. I think we're pretty close.
Yeah.
One thing that I do get nervous about, and this is what I think cropped up for Delve too, is we as tool providers cannot manufacture evidence for the customer.
Right.
We can collect it, but you can't create it. And one of the challenges is that we saw that teams were manufacturing board meeting minutes. That cannot fly.
Right.
You really have to do the work to stay secure to be secure.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate with all the tools out there. You and I know I can grab something and get an AI tool to generate an image that looks like my two-factor authentication's enabled on all the systems and whatever that, the EDR's installed and tracking the logs and set me up a log. Like, you can do that, but I'm going to say this, I'm going to agree with you. Don't game the system because you think you're going to get this compliance. You will get hacked, and it'll be 10 times worse, the scenario and situation you go through, than actually doing the work.
Yes. Brandon, you and I share this garden. We work in it.
Yeah.
If we poison the ground, it's bad for everybody, right?
100%.
And so, it's not that hard to do the work.
And
it's really not. Yeah.
You mean I worked at IR for several years, and listening to customers go through an incident like a ransomware, business email commerce, a network intrusion, you hear the pain. Like, I wish I would have, only if I did that earlier, only if I would have listened. And it's like, I get it. I completely, no judgment. Now let's do that going forward. Yeah. And always when now I'm consulting, working with customers, I give them those stories where I've worked with customers in the industry, whatever that may be, and say, look, they're coming in saying they wish they would have. And now they've been down for 7 to 14 to 30 days, no business, trying to get their customers back involved, dealing with counsel, carrier, insurance, like all that, and ransomware negotiations, trying to get their systems up. You don't want to do that. If I'm telling you to set up two-factor authentication and it takes a week to do, you'd rather deal with that in 30 days of your business being down.
Yes, absolutely. And, compliance doesn't solve all potential security issues.
No.
But, man, it sure does make some of the easy failures go away. And in the event that you do have it, I think that it really buys you a lot of goodwill.
100%.
Like, look, we worked hard at doing the best we could. We followed the guidelines. There's always a chance that something bad can happen. That chance was realized. I think that's a better place to be in.
100%. So, come up to the end. This has been great. Any closing takeaways? Any closing thoughts?
Well, I think that one thing is that I'm kind of excited for the next wave of small model innovation. I think there's going to be a lot of that happening, and I think it's going to be really intriguing. I think this is the promise of AI, not the behemoth of a single large language model to rule them all.
Right.
Is that engineering teams, whether it's a cybersecurity product or a product themselves or an internal business team, will start to develop their own intelligence layers inside their systems. That's really exciting for me. I think that compliance is here to stay, especially multi-framework compliance, and that take it as an ability to up your operations game and sleep better at night, and really, help us build that shared garden that's beautiful and vibrant and provides a lot of room for businesses and people to thrive. And that's what I'm excited about.
That's awesome. So, best way to get a hold of you, I got here your LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/JUBEALAS. It's kind of funny. I have a colleague I used to work at the government. His name was Ronnie Beals.
That's great. Yeah. And certainly strikecraft.com, our website.
Yeah.
Reach out to us. Yeah.
Yeah. So I put that on the screen. If anyone wants to see it, it's strikegraph.com. Thank you so much, Justin. That was amazing. I really appreciate the time and just all the knowledge.
Brandon, what a treat. I'm so glad to join you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Bye.
Give me a second here. So, guys, that was Daily Cyber. As you can see, Justin and we went through a lot of great information, especially when you're looking at AI, the technology, the evolution, compliance, governance, SOC 2, CMMC. There's so much evolving. I would highly recommend you watch this video, listen to this podcast again and again, just to get all the golden nuggets that we got out of this. I mean, the evolution of AI when security and compliance and what we're doing with regulatory it keeps evolving, and you can keep up to date with the changes and the evolution of it. It's really going to help your organization. It's going to help your business. It's going to help your customers, your partners. It's really going to help you evolve as an organization and being able to not only be successful as an organization, but also protect it. So don't forget, software is hackable, being connected is vulnerable. I'll see you next Daily Cyber.